flow in an ecosystem. Energy in an ecosystem flows from producers to consumers to decomposers. That is from green plants to the organisms which feed on green plants and other carnivores, and then finally to decomposers. Solar energy is fixed by green plants during the process of photosynthesis, and complex carbohydrates are synthesized. A very small fraction of the energy that is received by the earth is actually fixed by the green plants. This is about 1 to 5%. So there are models to explain how this energy flows in an ecosystem. So there are two models which are widely accepted. The first is single channel energy model and the second is Y-shaped energy model. This is a diagram showing single channel energy flow model. In this diagram, I is the total energy input or total light that falls on the green plants. LA stands for light absorbed by the green plants. PG is gross primary production. So the rate at which solar energy is captured and is converted into photosynthesis is converted into carbohydrates during photosynthesis is gross primary production. And A here is the total assimilation by the total energy assimilation by the green plants. Now, out of this gross primary production, some of the energy is lost as heat and also in respiration. So the energy that enters the next trophic level, that is herbivores, is known as the net primary production. The boxes here represent the trophic levels. You all know that trophic levels are formed due to the feeding habits of the different organisms. So this box represents the producers, this box represents herbivores, and this box represents carnivores. So out of the gross primary production, the energy that enters herbivores is referred to as net primary production. So here again, there will be out of this net primary production, some of the energy will be not utilized. So NU stands for energy not used. So it might be stored or exported. Then NA stands for energy not assimilated by the consumers. That means it might be digested out through their body. Then some of it again is lost in respiration. So the energy which enters next trophic level is P, which is nothing but secondary production. So in this way, the energy flows from one trophic level to other, and at every successive level, the energy flow is greatly reduced. It can be easily seen by the size of these boxes. Okay. So if 3000 kilocalories of light is incident upon green plants, about 50%, that is about 1500 kilocalories, is absorbed. Okay, that is A. La. Then, out of this 1500 kilocalories, about 15 kilocalories is the net primary production, or PN. That is the amount of energy that enters the next trophic level, that is herbivores. Then from herbivores, the secondary production P2 is 1.5 kilocalories. So it is about 10% of the net primary production. Further, this 1.5 will decrease either 10% or more. So the secondary production over here in after the herbivores, it is zero point 0.3 kilocalories. The point here is that if you see at every trophic level, there is decrease in the energy that is passed on or enters the next trophic level. Remember here, shorter the food chain, greater would be the available food energy. And increase in the food chain, there will be more loss in the energy. So this is a single channel energy flow model. Then the second model is the Y-shaped energy flow model. It is also known as two-channel model or two-channel energy flow model. So it says that in nature there are two kinds of food chain. We have seen this previously. There is a detritus food chain and a grazing food chain. So grazing food chain is the one which begins with green plants as producers, and then it goes through herbivores and then to carnivores. Whereas detritus food chain begins with dead organic matter, organisms that feed on dead organic matter, then detrivores, and then consumers. So it says that the undigested material from the grazing food chain is diverted to the detritus route. So decomposers simultaneously decompose the digested material which is given out by the organisms belonging to the grazing food chain. So it emphasizes that the two food chains, that is grazing food chain and the detritus food chain, they are not isolated. So the only difference between the two is the time lag between direct consumption of green plants and the ultimate utilization of dead organic matter. And in some ecosystem, one food chain may be important than the other. So in this model, a common boundary is shown for both the type of food chains. It also takes into consideration the import of organic matter, okay, then the export, and also the storage of organic matter. The decomposers are shown with a separate box. So they are placed separately, but the one of the arm shows the detritus food chain and the other arm here shows the grazing food chain. So this is Y-shaped energy flow model, which says that the two food chains that operate in nature are not cannot be separated. They simultaneously occur. They cannot be isolated. The waste that comes from the grazing food chain can be acted upon by the detrivores or the decomposers that are present in the environment. So it also takes into consideration the storage, export, and import of organic matter. Here, it was not as such included in the single channel energy flow model. Ecological succession. Ecological succession is the occurrence of relatively definite sequence of communities over a period of time in the same area. That means different communities will occur in a given area at different times. Communities are nothing but group of organisms belonging to different species that live together in an area. So in the forest, you must have seen there are trees which are the dominant community. So this happens over a period of time. Usually, what happens is if there is a barren land, it is first colonized by smaller plants, that is herbs, then shrubs, and then it is the shrubs are replaced by trees. In the animal species, also the same thing happens. So initially, a different group of animals colonize, and over a period of time, one community or one species will become a dominant in that area. So this happens because environment is dynamic. It is constantly changing. There are variations in the climatic factors. Also, the species that live in that area, they modify the environment. So the environment that is favorable today for a certain species might not be favorable for some other species over a period of time. So this is why the ecological succession occurs, or why there is change in the communities that inhabit a particular area. Now, there are types of succession. Succession can be broadly categorized into two types: primary succession and secondary succession. Primary succession begins on a primitive substratum. Primitive substratum means uh, there is no living matter present in this substratum previously. So, a substratum which is devoid of any living matter is known as primitive substratum. So, primary succession begins on such type of substratum. So, the group of organisms that colonize such substratum are known as pioneers. First group of organisms that colonize this substratum, they are known as pioneers. And primary succession can occur in terrestrial, freshwater, marine habitats. Then the second type of succession is secondary succession. Secondary succession begins on a previously built substrata. That means this substrata, sometime it contained living matter. Previously it had living matter. So the existing community might, in that area might have disappeared due to a sudden change in the climatic factor or any disaster, or suppose any foreign community has invaded that land. So there may be reasons why the existing community has disappeared. So the secondary succession begins on such type of substrata. Then it is more rapid. If we compare it to primary succession, secondary succession is more rapid. Now you should know one term, that is a SARE. A SARE is a whole sequence of communities that replaces one another in the given area. So that is another SARE. This is a term used for the communities that will replace one another in the given area. So let us now discuss the general process of ecological succession. There are stages in which this ecological succession occurs. The first is nudation. Nudation means development of a bare area without any life. Now, a bare area or a barren land can be developed by n number of reasons, like There may be soil erosion due to environmental factors like water, wind, or gravity. Then there may be deposition of sand due to landslide, volcanic activity, because of which that land has become barren. Then, due to natural calamities like drought, forest fires, hailstorm, that might destroy the existing community. And there may be destruction by man of the present habitat, or it might have been destroyed due to epidemic diseases. So there are reasons why barren land develops, and that process is known as nudation. Then the second stage in the ecological succession is invasion. Invasion means successful establishment of a species in a bare area. So seeds and spores of different trees or different plants, they migrate to this barren land by air, water, and after reaching this barren land, they tend to establish themselves in this new area. So they try to adjust to the prevailing environmental conditions. Then they seedlings grow and they develop into plants. So the reproduction increases and the individuals of a particular species increase in number. So number of individuals increase, so they will come close to each other. That will lead to aggregation. Or the plants are very closely placed to each other. That is known as aggregation. Then the third stage is competition and coaction. Now, since the plants are very closely growing to each other, here the space is limited, or the land which is there is limited. So obviously there will be a competition for food and space between the organisms, and they are going to affect each other's life. That is known as coaction. Okay, so competition between them will occur for food and space, and they will affect each other's life in a various way. That is known as coaction. This is the third stage in ecological succession. The fourth stage is reaction. Reaction means the living organisms that are present, or they are, have colonized this new area, they will slowly modify the environment in which they are present. Okay, so changes will take place in soil due to various um, chemicals that are secreted by these organisms. Then there will be changes in water, and the environment will become slowly, it will become unsuitable for the um, existing community, and over a period of time that will be replaced by a new community. So that is known as reaction, modification of environment by living organisms. Then the last stage, or the final stage in ecological succession, is stabilization. Stabilization is the final stage. It is also known as climax. So terminal community, or the last community, when it is in equilibrium with the climate of the area, we say that the community has been stabilized, or it is in equilibrium with the climate of the area. This community is not replaced, so it becomes a dominant community in that area, and that is known as a climax stage. So let us again revise what ecological succession is. Ecological succession means the occurrence of relatively a definite sequence of whole communities over a period of time in the same area. And community is nothing but a group of organisms belonging to different species living in an area. So types of succession, there are two types. Broadly, it is categorized into two types of succession. Primary succession, it will begin on a primitive substratum, that is a substratum which is devoid of any living matter. And the organisms which first colonize such substratum are known as pioneers. Then secondary succession, it begins on a previously built substrata. That means the substrata, some community was previously present over there, but due to some natural calamity, the community has, or change in the climatic conditions, the community has disappeared. So that the succession which begins on such a substrata is known as a secondary substrata succession. The succession on such substrata is more rapid when we compare it to primary succession. Then we should know what is the meaning of a say. Whole sequence of communities that replaces one another in the given area is known as a say. Now, the general process of ecological succession. Ecological succession occurs in certain stages. Okay, the first stage is known as nucleation, which is development of a barren area without any life. Now, how a barren land will be developed? There are a number of causes for that, like wind, water, then landslides, volcanic activity, drought, forest fire. They will create a barren land, or a land might be destroyed by human activities. So that the development of a barren area without any life is known as nudation. Then second stage is invasion. Invasion means successful establishment of a species in a bare area. So when a barren land is developed, um, there will be the seeds of the plants and the spores. They will migrate via water or air and reach this new area. So they will try to establish themselves and adjust to the prevailing environmental condition. So that is known as invasion. And they will grow into plants. As and when they grow, they the since the area is limited, the plants will grow very close to each other. Okay, so that is known as aggregation. And because of aggregation, what will happen? There will be competition for space and also for the food. Now, the coaction means that individuals that live in an area, they will compete with each other, or they will influence or affect each other's life. So that is known as coaction. Then reaction is the fourth stage. So the community that is formed in the, or that is being, that is growing in a particular area, it will modify the environment by its habits, or the different chemicals that might be secreted or given out to the body. So the modification of, and so there is modification in the soil, in the water, and the climatic conditions also. Over a period of years they undergo modification. So that is known as reaction. And the final stage in ecological succession is stabilization. Stabilization is also known as climax. Okay, so there will come a stage where the terminal community or the last community is in equilibrium with the surrounding, or surrounding area, that is the climate of that area, and it will not be replaced. It will become dominant community in that area. So that is known as stabilization. Let us now look at the hydrocell, that is the ecological succession that occurs in water habitats. So in the pond ecosystem, this ecological succession begins with colonization of phytoplanktons, which are the pioneer community, and terminates into forest, which is the climax community. So the stages include, first stage is phytoplankton stage. Phytoplanktons like blue-green alga, diatoms, are the first to colonize pond. Therefore, these are known as pioneer community. Then there are certain protists like paramecium, amoeba, In that case, the pH of the pond is less than 5. Then the second stage is rooted submerged stage. As and when the time passes, there is decomposition of the phytoplanktons after they die. So the organic matter results in the formation of soft mud at the bottom of the pond, and the pond becomes shallower, so the light can easily penetrate. And all these conditions favor the growth of rooted submerged plants. Okay, rooted submerged means their roots are fixed in the soil and they are submerged under the water. So these plants are Hydrilla, Vallisneria, and animals that can be found at this stage are Daphnia and Cyclops. Daphnia and Cyclops, these are crustaceans. Then the third stage is rooted floating stage. So since mud has begun accumulating at the bottom of the pond, the depth of water becomes less, or it is just 2 to 5 feet. So rooted plants are found, but their leaves they float on the surface of the water. So therefore, it is known as rooted floating stage. So plants like Nilambo and certain free floating plants like Azolla can be found. Animals like snails and beetles, beetles are insects, can be found at this stage. And the fourth stage is reed swamp stage. It is also known as amphibious stage because these plants they are rooted or their roots are fixed in the soil of the pond, but shoots or their stems they are exposed to air. And plants such as typha can be found at this stage. Animals like snails, insect that is water scorpion, kingfisher, which is a bird, can be found at the reed swamp stage. Then the fifth stage is the sedge meadow stage. Water level further decreases and species like carex, juncus, they form a mat-like vegetation in the center of the pond. Certain snails can also be found at this stage, and the ammonia and sulfides that are present in the pond, they are oxidized to nitrates and sulfates. Sixth stage is the woodland stage. Now in this stage, there is a dry soil. That means the water is minimum in this stage. So it favors the growth of terrestrial plants, that is shrubs like salix and certain trees like populus can be found at this stage. And there is an increased accumulation of humus. Then the last stage is the forest stage. It is also known as the climaxed stage, where the dominant community will exist. So the woodland community gets rapidly invaded by several trees. If it is a tropical climate, so it will form a tropical rainforest. If it is a temperate climate, so trees like quercus will be found. And if it is a moderate rainfall in that area, so tropical deciduous forest or monsoon forest can develop. So these are the seven stages. In the beginning, we saw that it was a body just containing water. So the first ones to colonize the pond were the phytoplanktons, and slowly then the rooted submerged plants they begin to colonize the pond. Then rooted floating plants Then the reed swamp where the amphibious plants were found, sedge meadow stage where plants like carex were found, and woodland stage, which is a stage where mostly shrubs develop in the pond ecosystem, and the soil becomes dry because the water level decrease. And then the last was the forest stage, where the pond is completely replaced by the forest. So see how one community has replaced other in the pond ecosystem. So this is known as a hydrocell, or the ecological succession that occurs in water habitats or begins in water habitats. Now, the stage one, it is known as a pioneer community stage. Then in stage seven, the forest, it is the climax community. And stages 2 to 6, these are known as serial stages. Okay, before previously we have discussed what is a ser. So 2 to 6 are the serial stages. Then yes, this is the succession which has occurred in the pond. So you can see initially the ones were the phytoplanktons. Phytoplanktons were the ones to colonize the pond. Then the completely submerged plants, okay? Rooted submerged plants, Hydrocell vallisneae, and as and when you can see the rooted floating plants. See, their roots are in the soil, but they are floating on the leaves are floating on the water surface. Then the next was reed swamp stage, okay, amphibious stage. The shoots are found above the water surface, whereas the roots are fixed in the soil. Then the typha. Typha is the amphibious stage plant. It is found in the reed swamp stage. And the next is sedge meadow stage, and then the woodland stage where shrubs can be found, and finally the trees. So this is how a pond is completely converted into a forest ecosystem. Okay. Then now let us look at the lithocere. Lithocere is a ecological succession which occurs on bare rock surfaces. Previously, we have discussed what is the meaning of lithos. Lithos means stone. So, the ecological succession which occurs on the barren rock surface is known as a lithocere. So, it includes the following stages. First stage is crustose lichen stage. Now, lichen is a association between an alga and a fungus. Okay, both the entities are found in the lichen. So the first is crustose lichen stage. In a barren area, crustose lichen are the first to colonize, okay, because the barren area is poor in moisture and also organic matter, and there are extreme temperatures. So the lichens like rhizocarpon are the first to invade that area or colonize that area. Now, the acids that are produced by these lichens, they cause weathering of rocks. You understand weathering, that is breaking of the rocks. So, as and when the lichens die, they add the organic matter to the small particles of the rock. And the animal species that can be seen in the crustose lichen stage are the ants and spiders. Then the second stage is foliose lichen stage. Okay, foliose lichen, again it is a type of lichen where the thalli, it is large leaf-like. Okay, the thallus is large and leaf-like. That the example is Parmelia. So they The humus gets accumulated in this stage and a fine soil develops. So initially the weathering of rocks produces small rock particles. Now here slowly fine soil is developing. Third stage is moss stage. In stage, the thin soil that is formed in the previous stage favors the growth of xerophytic mosses, or the mosses which can survive extreme dry conditions. So, like polytrichum, they can be found in this stage. Animals like spiders, springtails, they can be seen. So now slowly the thickness of soil will increase due to addition of organic matter after the death of the organisms. And the fourth is the herb stage. Okay, so it began with the lichens, crustose, folios, and then the moss mosses. So here it will now be colonized by herbs. So the soil and the minerals will favor the growth of herbs, and xeric condition will decrease. That means the dry conditions will decrease, and slowly the moisture content of the land will increase, and therefore grasses are favored in this stage. Then the shrub stage. Slowly what will happen, the herbs will be replaced by the shrubs, and over the time shrubs will be replaced by trees like which will be the climax communities. So at the forest stage, different vertebrates and invertebrates can be found like snails, slugs, centipedes, mouse, and birds. So Lithocere is the ecological succession which begins on the bare rock surface. It is usually there are xeric conditions, that means the surface is dry. In that case, the first ones to colonize or the pioneer community are um, Hostile lichens. Lichen is an association of an alga and a fungus. So slowly the soil will be developed because weathering of rocks will take place, and the soil will favor the growth of different communities. So the next two are the foliose lichens that will colonize the area. Then after foliose lichen, the mosses will develop. Okay? After mosses, there will be herbs that will colonize the area because the xeric conditions will decrease or there will be an increase in the moisture content of that area. Finally, there will be shrubs, and the last are the forest community that will colonize the area. So, forest will be the climax community, and it is usually associated with different kinds of organisms. So, in today's lecture, we have discussed the energy flow in an ecosystem. That the energy in an ecosystem flows from producers to consumers and to decomposers. So, the solar energy is fixed by green plants during the process of photosynthesis, and it is stored in the form of complex carbohydrates. Now, a very small fraction, that is about 1 to 5% of the solar energy that receives Earth, is fixed by the green plants. And there are two models which are there to explain how this energy flows in the ecosystem. The first is single channel energy model, and the second is Y-shaped energy model. Now, this is the single channel energy flow model, which explains the flow of energy from producers to consumers to decomposers. Here, the boxes represent the trophic level. So, the first box here is the are the producers. It is representing the first trophic level, that is producers. Then the second box is of consumers. Second and third boxes, they represent the second and third trophic level, that is herbivores and the carnivores, which are nothing but the consumers. So I, or the total light that I is the total light that falls on the green plant, out of which La is the light absorbed. Then Pg is the gross primary production. That means the amount of energy that is produced by the green plants, out of which part of it will be lost in the form of heat and in respiration. So the energy that reaches the next trophic level is the net primary production. Out of the net primary production, you can see the part of it is not utilized and also not assimilated by the primary consumer or the herbivore. And then the energy that flows from herbivores to carnivores is secondary production or P. So at every level there is loss of energy in the form of through respiration, and also part of it is not utilized and not assimilated at the consumer level. So if 3000 kilocalories of light was incident on the producers, out of which only 50%, that is about 1500 kilocalories, is actually absorbed, and 15 kilocalories is the actual net primary production. Secondary production is way much less than this, so it is about 1.5 kilocalories. And again, this energy which is transmitted, it is decreased. So at every trophic level, the energy which is transmitted to the next trophic level will go on decreasing, goes on decreasing. So this is what is the implication of this diagram. Then this is the Y-shaped energy flow model. Y-shaped energy flow model says that in nature there are two types of food chains, that is grazing food chain and detritus food chain. So the waste that is given out through the grazing food chain, the undigested materials, can be acted upon by the decomposers in the ecosystem. So it makes a place for basing the decomposers. So decomposers are represented by a separate box. It also makes provisions for import of organic matter, then the storage and export of organic matter. So it also takes into account the detritus food chain along with the grazing food chain. It says that the two food chains are cannot be isolated from one another. Okay. And then we have discussed what is ecological succession. It is occurrence of relatively definite sequence of communities over a period of time in the same area. So the group of organisms belonging to different species in a living area is known as a community. And then we have discussed the types of succession. Primary succession. So the succession which begins on a primitive substratum, that is the substratum which previously didn't have any living matter. That is a primitive substratum. And the organisms which colonize such substratum are known as pioneers. And then we have seen the secondary succession. Secondary succession, it begins on a previously built substratum, and it is more rapid when we compare it to the primary succession. So what is a said? Whole sequence of communities that replaces one another in a given area is known as a cell. Then we discussed the general process of ecological succession, which includes 5 stages. The first is nudation. Nudation is development of a bare area without any life. Now, a barren land may be developed due to a natural calamity or due to activities of uh, humans, like destruction of habitat or some due to some epidemic disease. So, and natural factors like landslides, volcanic activity, they can also develop a bare area. And second is invasion. Once a barren land is developed, seeds and spores of different plants, they reach this area. They will grow into the seedlings and finally into the plants. The plants will reproduce and the number will increase. They will grow close to each other, that is known as aggregation. So, the successful establishment of a species in a bare area is nothing but the invasion. So, the new species that uh, colonize the area, they will try to adjust to the climatic conditions or the environmental conditions of that area. That is known as invasion. Then the third is competition and coaction. Since now the plants are growing very close to each other, there will occur a competition for food and space. Space is limited, food is also limited. So in that case, a competition will occur. Now the different plants that grow, they will affect each other's life uh, and also the life of other species. So that is known as coaction. Now, the fourth stage is reaction. It is nothing but the modification of environment by the living organisms. So, changes take place in the soil and other environmental factors. And the last stage in the ecological succession is stabilization. Stabilization means there will occur a point where a dominant community will exist and it is a terminal community or the climax community. It will not be replaced by any other community in that area because it is in equilibrium with the climate of that area. So that is known as stabilization or the climax. Then we discussed what is a hydrocell, the ecological succession that occurs in water habitats. So we have seen this diagram where the phytoplanktons are the initial ones to colonize the pond, and then slowly it is colonized by the submerged plants like Hydrilla. Then there are rooted submerged stage, and the certain plants where their leaves float on the water surface, but their roots are fixed in the soil of the pond. Then the amphibious stage, where the shoots are exposed to air, but the roots are fixed in the soil. So subsequently, shrubs and the trees are developed. So there are 7 stages in ecological succession that occurs in water or hydrocell. There's a phytoplankton stage, then the rooted submerged stage, rooted floating stage, reed swamp stage, sedge meadow stage, woodland stage, which is of the shrubs, or the shrubs can be found in the woodland stage, and the last is the forest stage, which is the climax community. And this is how a pond gets converted into a forest. Then we discussed what is a lithocell. Lithos means stone, so the ecological succession which occurs on the bare rock surfaces is known as a lithocell. It includes crustose-lichen stage. These bare rock surfaces, they are devoid of organic matter or poor in organic matter and moisture. So the crustose lichens are the first to colonize such substratum, and they produce acids which cause weathering of rocks or breaking of rocks into fine particles. Then the second are the foliose lichens, which colonize. As and when the humus is accumulated, a fine soil develops, and the foliose lichen can be seen colonizing the area. The third stage is the moss stage. So, in the moss stage, a thin layer of soil is developed, which favors the growth of xerophytic mosses. Xerophytic mosses means which can grow in little amount of moisture or dry conditions. So then again the thickness of soil increases, uh, and there is an addition of organic matter. So the soil and minerals they favor the growth of herbs. So grasses can be found in the herb stage. And the xeric conditions they decrease. Okay, here it should be ZERIC. It's a spelling mistake. Please note that. So the xeric conditions decrease. That means the dry conditions decrease in that case. Then the next is shrub stage. Herbs are replaced by shrubs, and then finally shrubs are replaced by trees, which is the climax community or the forest stage. So we see a number of organisms associated with forests like snails, slugs, then centipedes, mouse, birds. So we have discussed ecological succession and energy flow in an ecosystem, and this ends the chapter 2, which is ecosystem.